In 1700, the average person consumed about 4 pounds of sugar per year. Today, the average American consumes over 150 pounds. That's a 3,700% increase in 3 centuries. No other substance in human history has scaled that fast. Not tobacco, not alcohol, not caffeine. And behind that number is a trail of burned forests, shattered bodies, corrupted science, and one of the most successful corporate cover-ups of the 20th century. But here's the strangest part. For most of human history, sugar barely existed. Almost nobody ate it. Almost nobody needed it. And the fact that you probably can't go a single day without consuming it? That was engineered, deliberately. Over 400 years. This is how it happened. Sugarcane is a tropical grass. It originated in Southeast Asia thousands of years ago, and for most of that time it stayed there. The process of crystallizing cane juice into solid sugar was developed in India around the 5th century, and the technique slowly migrated west, through Persia, into the Arab world, and eventually to the Mediterranean. By the time European crusaders encountered sugar in the Middle East around the 12th century, it was treated like a spice. Apothecaries sold it by the ounce. Kings used it as a diplomatic gift. It appeared in medicines, not desserts. A single pound of sugar in medieval England could cost the equivalent of a month's wages for a labourer. You didn't eat sugar, you admired it, but the Europeans who tasted it became obsessed. And obsession, combined with colonial power, is a dangerous formula. When Columbus sailed to the Caribbean in 1493 on his second voyage, he brought sugarcane cuttings with him. The tropical climate was perfect. The soil was rich, and within decades, the Caribbean islands became the engine of the most profitable and most brutal agricultural system the world had ever seen. Growing sugarcane is backbreaking. The stalks have to be cut by hand, crushed within hours of harvesting before the juice ferments, and boiled in enormous vats at extreme temperatures. The work was relentless, dangerous, and never-ending. Harvest season could last 5 months, with labourers working 18-hour shifts around boiling kettles where a single stumble meant severe burns or worse. The Europeans needed labour, lots of it, and they found it in Africa. Over the next 3 centuries, more than 12 million Africans were kidnapped and shipped across the Atlantic. Over 90% of them were sent to the Caribbean and South America. The primary destination wasn't cotton fields in Virginia. It was sugar plantations in Barbados, Jamaica, Haiti, and Brazil. Sugar didn't just benefit from slavery. Sugar was the reason the transatlantic slave trade scaled to the monstrous size that it did. The Caribbean plantations consumed human life at a pace that shocked even contemporaries. On many islands, the death rate among enslaved workers exceeded the birth rate. Planters found it cheaper to work people to death and import replacements than to invest in keeping them alive. Barbados alone imported over 380,000 enslaved Africans between the mid-1600s and emancipation, yet by the time slavery ended, the island's enslaved population was only around 80,000. The math tells the story that polite history often skips. But the sugar kept flowing, and as production scaled, prices dropped. What had been a luxury reserved for monarchs became accessible to the middle class, and then to everyone. In England, sugar consumption exploded in tandem with another import, tea. By the 1700s, the British were spooning sugar into their teacups at an accelerating rate. Per capita consumption jumped from £4 a year in 1700 to over £20 by the time of the American Revolution. Sweetened tea gave factory workers a cheap energy boost during grueling industrial shifts. Sugar and the Industrial Revolution fed each other. Cheap calories fueled the workforce that powered the factories that generated the wealth that bought more sugar. France had its own sugar obsession. French pastry evolved into one of the most technical culinary disciplines on the planet, and sugar was at the centre of it. Jams and preserves became a household staple. Chocolate, which the Aztecs drank bitter and spiced, was sweetened beyond recognition and turned into the confection Europeans craved. Every single one of these traditions was built on the backs of enslaved people an ocean away. The distance made it easy to forget. The sweetness made it easy not to ask. Then came the 19th century, and sugar found a way to make itself even cheaper. In 1747, a German chemist discovered that sugar beets contained the same sucrose as tropical sugarcane. For decades, nobody cared. But when Napoleon's wars cut off France from Caribbean sugar supplies, the French invested heavily in domestic beet sugar production. After the wars ended, beet sugar didn't disappear. It competed. By the late 1800s, European beet sugar rivaled Caribbean cane sugar in volume. Sugar was now produced on 2 continents, prices cratered further, and consumption kept climbing. In 1900, the average American consumed roughly 60 pounds of sugar a year. That's 15 times the amount consumed just 200 years earlier. And the century that followed would make even that number look quaint. The 20th century turned sugar from a commodity into an invisible architecture embedded in nearly everything people ate. Soft drinks led the charge. Coca-Cola, invented in 1886, went from a pharmacy curiosity to a global empire. By mid-century, vending machines dispensed sugary drinks in every school, office, and gas station in America. But soda was just the visible tip. Food manufacturers discovered that adding sugar to products made them taste better, sell faster, and, crucially, become mildly addictive. Sugar started appearing in bread, pasta sauce, salad dressing, crackers, yogurt, canned soup, and hundreds of products where no one expected it. Then came high-fructose corn syrup. In the 1970s, American agricultural policy made corn absurdly cheap through government subsidies. Japanese scientists had developed an enzyme process that converted cornstarch into a liquid sweetener that was cheaper than cane sugar and easier to blend into processed foods. American food companies adopted it almost overnight. By the 1980s, high-fructose corn syrup had replaced sugar in most American soft drinks and processed foods. The average person was consuming more sweetener than ever before, and most of them had no idea. But people were getting sick. Obesity rates climbed. Type 2 diabetes surged. Heart disease remained the leading killer in America. And by the 1960s, scientists were beginning to connect the dots between sugar consumption and cardiovascular disease. This is where the story turns from dark to sinister. In 1967, the Sugar Research Foundation, a trade group representing the sugar industry, paid 3 Harvard scientists the equivalent of roughly $50,000 to publish a literature review in the New England Journal of Medicine. The review was designed to do one specific thing: shift the blame for heart disease away from sugar and onto dietary fat. The studies included in the review were handpicked by the industry group. The ones that implicated sugar were discredited. The ones that pointed to fat were highlighted. The funding was never disclosed. That single paper shaped American nutritional policy for the next 5 decades. The US government's dietary guidelines demonized fat. Low fat became the health buzzword of an entire generation. Food manufacturers removed fat from their products and replaced it with sugar to compensate for the lost flavor. Americans obediently switched to low-fat yogurt, low-fat cookies, and low-fat everything, all loaded with added sweeteners. They thought they were eating healthier. They were eating more sugar than ever. The documents revealing this arrangement weren't uncovered until 2016, when a researcher at the University of California, San Francisco, found them buried in archives. 50 years of corrupted nutritional science, exposed by a paper trail that the sugar industry assumed would never surface. Today, sugar is in approximately 74% of packaged foods sold in American supermarkets. It hides behind over 60 different names on ingredient labels: sucrose, dextrose, maltose, barley malt, rice syrup, cane juice, fruit concentrate. Most consumers don't recognize more than a handful of these aliases. That's by design. The World Health Organization recommends no more than 25 grams of added sugar per day. A single can of Coca-Cola contains 39 grams. One can, and you've already exceeded the daily limit by more than half. The average American consumes roughly 3 to 4 times the recommended amount every single day. And the consequences are everywhere. Over 42% of American adults are now classified as obese. More than 37 million Americans have diabetes. Heart disease remains the #1 cause of death. Sugar isn't the only factor, but it's woven into all of them. And for decades, the industry that profited from it actively suppressed the science that could have warned people sooner. 400 years ago, sugar was a rare curiosity locked in apothecary jars. Today, it's in your bread, your ketchup, your salad dressing, and your children's breakfast cereal. The substance that once cost a laborer's monthly wage is now so cheap and so pervasive that avoiding it requires active, deliberate effort. The journey from apothecary spice to invisible omnipresence required colonial empires, millions of enslaved lives, an industrial revolution, a world war that accidentally created the beet sugar industry, a corn subsidy that nobody questioned, and a bribery scheme at Harvard that derailed public health for half a century. Sugar didn't conquer the world because people wanted it. People always wanted it. The craving is biological, hardwired into our brains from an era when calories were scarce and sweetness meant ripe fruit. Sugar conquered the world because a series of industries, governments, and institutions made it so cheap and so unavoidable that resisting it became harder than consuming it. And that's the trick. The most successful conquests aren't the ones fought with armies. They're the ones where the conquered don't realize it's happened. Thank you for watching, and please subscribe for more content like this.